Sports streaming is the hottest ticket in media, but did you know that as much as 90% of sports streaming attention, as in minutes watched, is actually still happening on linear television via streaming apps like YouTube TV and Fubo? For example, the NFL has media rights agreements with ESPN, ABC, CBS, Paramount Plus, Fox, Fox One, NBC, Peacock, Amazon Prime, YouTube, and Netflix, which can cost the average consumer as much as $1,500 a year to watch their favorite sport, according to a recent USA Today study. And just 2 weeks ago, on February 25th, the FCC issued a public notice for comment on sports broadcasting practices and marketplace developments, highlighting the rift that everyone feels, from advertisers to casual fans. Welcome back to the State of Streaming podcast. I'm your host, Tim Rowe, and today I'm joined by one of the most qualified analysts on TV and streaming. That's Ross Bedish, Senior Analyst at eMarketer. Enjoy. Ross Bedish, eMarketer, you reached out and you had some really interesting research about sports, about streaming, and about really there's a big delta. There's a big spread between eyeballs, attention, and kind of the truth behind the sports streaming narrative. Ross, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on, and I'm always down to talk about sports.
Yeah, no, this is a good place to talk about sports, and we'll tie it back to the most important theme of the day, which is streaming, which is television advertising, so that we can write this off as a business lunch. You released a book that I think is actually the perfect launch point for today's conversation. You wrote a book, you published a book last year, 1999, the year low culture conquered America and kick-started our bizarre times. You want to tell us a little bit about that book, and then we'll talk about sports streaming?
Well, yeah. So in that book, I just make the case that all the trashy entertainment from the late 90s, like the Pro Wrestling Attitude Era, the Insane Clown Posse taking off, and the Beanie Baby Mania, was a sign of what was to come in our current age. So I just find that the trash from a quarter century ago shapes our world in some very unusual ways. And a lot of it comes from what was very popular on television at the time. You know, we're living in a Jerry Springer world.
In more ways than one. And we'll talk about that. But let's talk about the sports research. And I think that as we go through this, the reason that your book from last year stands out in this conversation is more leagues are really branching into a global audience. The clip culture of sports, of athletics. There was a lot of debate about the NBA All-Star dunk contest and kind of just the quality of sports programming. It seems like there's a pretty broad spectrum of that, and a lot of what's driving it is the way that we consume. What did your research find about the way that we consume sports as it relates to streaming TV?
Well, the time spent on sports is still predominantly with linear TV. So like streaming is what obviously it gets people's attention, and that's where the growth is. You know, streaming's coming from being like nothing, 15, 20 years ago to a sizable portion of the audience now, but it's not a lot of time spent. So what we see is most sports viewers will watch sports on a streaming service. So it has a lot of viewers, but they're not regularly doing so. You know, you might watch like the Jake Paul Tyson match, or you might watch some Peacock basketball. But when we look at data from Inscape, for instance, we see that on-demand streaming services are only about 10% of time spent with sports. The other 2/3 is going to, cable packages. Now, if you include VMVPDs as streaming, then the streaming share is more like 1/3. But I would argue that even though VMVPDs deliver it digitally, you still have to subscribe to the TV networks. Like you're still watching it on ABC or on Fox Sports or FS1 or whatever. The advertising is still linear TV for all intents and purposes. But that's just such a big gap because streaming accounts for almost 2/3 of time spent with the TV screen in general. But then with live sports, it shrinks down to like a 10th. And that's going to change. But it is where it is right now.
And to help our audience with some of the nomenclature of VMPD, right? Even the acronyms are sometimes hard to get out.
Yeah, it's a terrible one.
It really is. What is that? Who are some of the the popular streaming apps that we would know fall into that category.
Yeah, so a VMVPD, we don't even need to spell it out. It's so stupid. It's like
We're killing it today. It's done.
yeah, it's we've tried to kill it with we call it actually digital pay TV is what we call
All
it,
right.
but that hasn't caught on broadly. So I'm using this other term because people probably know what it is. But it's digital cable. It's Hulu at Live TV, YouTube TV, Fubo. You're paying for a package of TV networks, but it's done through a streaming service. And there is a lot of sports watching on that. That's about 20%. So, it's like double what is on Paramount Plus, Peacock, Netflix, Prime Video, because it's just retransmitting what TV stations people have been watching for decades. And that's kind of the main purpose why people use those services. Like, if you look after football season, they'll report quarterly losses on those services, like all the companies that have them. Yeah, so that category is like incrementally grown,
Really?
but it doesn't grow quarter over quarter. It grows at the start of certain seasons. It's very like they lose subscribers end of football season. During baseball season, that doesn't have quite the appeal because that's more of an RSN, regional sports network driven business. So people who want to watch that have to go to the MLB TV package or to their individual RSNs, like Gotham Sports app if you're a Yankees fan, for instance. But the VMVPDs, they have their little niche, but they haven't really gone beyond that. So like what I guess I get when I'm researching all this stuff is a lot of the viewers who are counted as digital viewers of live sports are pretty casual. Most people aren't predominantly watching live sports that way. I do. I'm sure others who are listening to a streaming podcast do, but that's not the behavior in the general population. The general population is still to find out those TV networks and watch that way. And the TV networks hold the rights to like a lot of the greatest stuff still. So you can't totally get around it yet.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the rights, because Michael Beach from the State of Screens put out a piece earlier this week, actually, that sports could be a bubble. That's the sports rights industry starting to look a little bit like a bubble. And we look at how much the streaming apps are actually paying to compete for these rights relative to the number of minutes of ads per hour. And kind of you start to break down the math. Doesn't seem like the math is all the way there. Are you seeing anything similar in your research?
I felt that way for a little while now because the rights have just increased at such an exorbitant rate. Like that NBA deal that was renewed last year,
6.9 billion, up from 2.7 billion to 6.9 billion.
Yeah. Yeah. So like it, I get why TNT, didn't want to play ball like at first, because that's just a crazy amount of money. Or if we even go on a smaller scale, like Peacock, which doesn't have, a lot of subscribers. They're kind of towards the bottom of the Nielsen gauge. They pay a lot of money to like the Big Ten and the Big East to have streaming exclusives, and they don't release data. But I'd be surprised if like a St. John's game on Peacock is even bringing in 500,000 viewers, because like a college basketball game on FS1 usually doesn't, like, it's got to be a good game to crack 1 million.
The kid streaming the game on TikTok that he's watching in his dorm room probably has as many viewers or more.
But they're paying a lot of money for it. So I do wonder, like, some companies can take it as a loss. Like Amazon, they probably honestly don't care that much if they lose money on the NBA because
didn't even feel
they don't feel it. And they're bringing more people into Amazon and just increasing awareness for Amazon in tandem with the NBA. So there's a halo effect there. But like Apple TV paying for MLB or like Peacock with Big East basketball, if you're having peanuts for viewers, those losses eventually, well, Apple's another one that doesn't probably care if they eventually add up. But, with Peacock and then with Paramount coming with these UFC matches, like they're not going to get 40 million people to watch all these fights. The math makes it seem like it's going to be a loss leader on some of these.
Yeah, the math is definitely tough, but I think then, to your point, Ross, is looking more fundamentally at the company itself. Is Amazon a streaming TV app? No, streaming TV is a component of the thing that they do, right? They print money from AWS. Is Is Netflix a streaming app? Yes, right. They have to make money in a fundamentally different way. So as we're looking at these things, I think keeping those things in mind, right? The MLS tripled their annual rights payments, but lost 65% of viewers after moving to Apple TV. Just really interesting stuff that we'll continue to keep an eye on. What are you most excited about in the research? What things stood out to you that excited you the most?
Well, something you just alluded to. I like seeing the trade off between like short term, we gotta just increase our subscription revenue and our retrans fees at all costs, and then long term thinking of like we'll give up some of that if we reach more people who we want to have as our long term fan base. Like I'm thinking of all those NBA teams that said we're not going to use a cable network that charges our subscribers, charges our fans $6 a month. We're just going to put it on our local affiliate so we can have more fans and hopefully get them to come to the games and buy the merchandise and like become lifelong Utah Jazz fans. That excites me. Another thing that excites me, even though it often pisses me off more, is the breadth of what's available has greatly increased. Now that means sometimes it's very hard to find like what you want to watch. Like even something as mainstream as the Yankees, you might have to go to the Yankees website that day and be like, are they on Yes Network, or is it on NBC that day, or is it on Apple TV? Like, who knows? Because it changes every game, and and it's not even like a regular cadence like Sunday Night Football's on NBC. It's like Amazon Prime could just grab a game whenever they want to. You have to pay attention, but everything is there if you are willing to pay for it. And for tertiary sports, that wasn't always the case. So like I like seeing things like Flow Sports. I don't know if people are familiar
Yeah.
with it, but
Tell us about
well,
Flow.
it's just kind of a niche streaming service. You pay a monthly fee and you can get access to like all sorts of college and even high school sports that wouldn't be on there otherwise. Big Ten Plus is another example. Like if you're really a big fan of Penn State wrestling, and Penn State wrestling is huge. They've won like I don't know. Kale Sanderson's won probably like 6 national titles since he's been coached there. Like they're unbelievable. But that's not on national TV normally. But now you can watch it if you want. You can watch college volleyball and college gymnastics, and you can find lower level semi pro hockey if you want to go search for it. That was basically limited to radio broadcasts in the past. So while streaming comes with the frustration at the high level of like, man, I just want to watch my team and I got to figure out where I'm going to do that. And I also have to probably pay 5 people to do it. That's annoying. But if you're into a sport that isn't one of the big 4, you can put it on your TV screen and watch it live with a way you wouldn't have been able to ever do so before.
Are regional sports networks survivable as a business model, or is it this pivot to niche? Is it team access? Like, do you have a take on how this all plays out?
Well, yeah, it's going to be a mess. I think regional sports networks survive for the strongest teams. If you are, the Spectrum LA Dodgers channel or like MSG, you're in this huge market. You have such a large built-in fan base. You can financially profit through an RSN probably indefinitely. But like the Atlanta Braves or like the Utah Jazz, teams in smaller markets whose like salary roll isn't always at the top. So like, they're not going to be able to compete for the playoffs every single year. That's a lot harder. And a lot of those are dying off, and they were relying on a model that, just doesn't work. Like if you're relying on cable subscribers who aren't actually going to watch your channel, but just pay into it, well, that doesn't really work in an era of cord cutting. So for them, they have to figure out something. So I think there's going to be more league control for MLB, NBA, NHL, for the franchises who are unable to make it go themselves. And there's going to be some pushback, though, because those giants like the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Knicks, they're not going to want to give up that control because it benefits them to be in the old system. So that's something that's probably going to come up in collective bargaining agreements for all these leagues when they renew with their unions. And then with the niche, it's just kind of spaghetti on the wall right now. Like, the Roku channel has League One Volleyball, which is one of 3 pro volleyball leagues that are running in the United States right now. Like if you want to, watch that, that's great. But I don't know how good the discoverability is or how many built-in fans there already are that even though it's cheap, the rights cost nothing and it's cheap to pretty much just film that with one or two cameras and put it on the Roku channel. I don't know if there's going to be enough revenue there to like drive serious investment. So, it's the same with all those sports that are on Big Plus. And it's tough to know which ones will actually drive anything for revenue or which ones are just there as an experiment.
It's a fun time to experiment. There are a lot of experiments out there. And what's cool is we've got this conversation on the record. So as time goes on, we'll be able to look back and see what's happened. I want to share some stats from Michael Beach, State of Screens, about the sports rights bubble, kind of get your reaction to a few of these. Streaming services are only selling 10 to 20% of the inventory. You covered that in the open, at roughly a quarter of the CPM. So it's less inventory and a lower CPM. Let's see, streaming will hit 50% of TV ad impressions by 2030, but that's still 4 years away. So still pretty far off.
Yeah, that'd be probably 3 years after CTV exceeds TV and ad spend. So the impressions are definitely a lagging thing.
Interesting. And then impressions again growing while linear impressions fall. Could sports be an opportunity for linear to reclaim market share or to reinvent the way that we think about the bundle? Is cable dead?
I do think cable is not dead yet, but unable to fully resuscitate itself from its decline. And
All right.
but the thing that's keeping it from being dead, that is what you're talking about, is that sports bundle. And they keep thinking of new ways to slice the bundle. I think one of the more interesting developments is NBC killed the NBC Sports Network, the cable channel. Then they had all these Peacock exclusives. Then it was like clear that, well, not everyone can like watch this Peacock exclusive. So let's put it back on the NBC Sports channel and bring it back. So like those NBA doubleheaders are on the reintroduced channel. And same with some of those like Big East basketball games. There's enough value in cable that they brought that back. And that's a rare use case perhaps, but that shows that cable isn't dead, because if it is, why would you bring back a sports network? You need it for the audience reach, because your streaming service alone isn't going to deliver what advertisers want.
At the same time as spinning off Versant, and Versant appearing to run maybe a similar playbook themselves, and combining those streaming and broadcast assets. Well, Ross, there's a lot here, and probably enough for a follow-up part 2 conversation. But it wouldn't be a full podcast if we didn't spend some time talking about your book was featured in a movie. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, a documentary. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about, what was the documentary? Where would we have seen it?
It was Dirty Talk was the name of it. It was a docuseries on ABC, and it was also available on Hulu and Disney Plus. So if you're a streaming person, Hulu and Disney Plus would be the way to look at it. And it goes in depth on how 90s talk shows like Jenny Jones, Geraldo, Jerry Springer, Ricky Lake have shaped our society. So like my book has a chapter on that. It's actually the opening chapter. That's how the showrunner found me. So, I'm in there as a talking head, but then they also talk to like Maury Povich and Montel, all these like great names from that era. So it was a fun experience. I had a lot of people who I haven't talked to in years reach out because they saw me on TV, which made me think, hey, there's people still watching ABC Live. That's interesting.
This stuff does work.
If you put something on ABC, no matter what it is, there's still probably going to be at least 1.5 million people that tune in. Maybe a third of them are sleeping, but they're still there.
One of them's my aunt, so you'll definitely get a call from my aunt. All the heroes of being homesick. You got to spend time with legends. That's awesome. And Ross, we got to spend time with a legend today. Thank you for being here. This has been a fun, insightful conversation, and I'm sure just the first of many. Thank you for being here, Ross.
This is a good time. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. If folks want to learn more about what you're working on, if they want to stay in touch with you, where should we go? Where are you most active on social? How do we stay in touch with your work?
Yeah, so I'm on, LinkedIn would probably be the easiest way, and just, raw Spanish backslash. I mean, LinkedIn.com backslash raw Spanish. Pretty easy to find me there. Same on Twitter. But if I'm sharing more streaming research on LinkedIn, and then if you really want to shoot me a message, the easiest way would be rbenish at eMarketer. Email is my preferred method of communication because I'm a millennial.
Cool. We'll make it all easy to find. So regardless of your demographic age range, you'll be able to get in touch with Ross.
All right.
Ross, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thank you.
Absolutely. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please share with a colleague or a client and start a conversation today. We'll see y'all next time.